Right guys, welcome back to the channel. Before you watch this podcast with Byron, do me a little favour. Give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe and ring the bell. This podcast will be going out on Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to jump over to my Facebook channel, Holden_official, and share that on Facebook, you will be doing me a big favour. All my social medias are in the comment section of this video. That's my Facebook, my TikTok, my Instagram, and my Twitter. And all the links for that will be found in the comment section of this video. Also, Byron Lacy's book, you can find that in the comment section of this video, the link. It'll take you straight to Amazon and you can buy it. And I suggest, if you want a good story and a man's experience throughout his whole life, go and buy that book, and you can find the link for that in the comment section, guys. This is a crazy story. Byron is 72 years of age, and these are his experiences from whenever he was 6 until the age he's at now, 72. This was one of the most enjoyable podcasts that I've ever done, and it was an absolute honor to have Byron on to share these experiences. So remember, guys, give this video a thumbs up, and let's show the respect and give the respect to Byron. I hope you enjoy this podcast, guys. Peace and enjoy. Byron Lacy, how are you doing, sir?
Very good. How are you?
It's an absolute pleasure to get you on, Byron, and your story is fantastic. You do have a book out, and that book can be found in the comment section of this podcast. I've linked your book in the podcast. Take you straight to Amazon, and you can buy Byron's book. I would suggest people go over and buy it. But today we're honoured and privileged to actually get Byron on. And Byron, whereabouts are you from? Do you want to give a brief description to the audience where you're from?
I live in Nacogdoches, Texas. I was born in March 21st, 1950 in Burnet, Texas. And when I was 2.5 years old, I was diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
The doctor told my parents that it was a very invasive cancer, and it's a wonder that I'd actually live long enough for him to be able to find it. And he suggested that they might want to have another baby so that it wasn't such a blow to them if I died. And they operated on me a week after he diagnosed me, and my sister was born 2 years later.
Wow. That must have been a heavy impact for your whole family to hear that type of, about their baby. You're only 2 years of age, and well, obviously you recovered well. And we'll be talking about these scenarios throughout the podcast. You were too young to remember, I suppose. Do you remember anything about that time at all?
I remember one hospital room. I remember that it had a wall that was made out of tile right next to my bed. And this is when I was 2.5. And that there was a set of trays in a metal stand with food on them at one point. And my mother was shocked that I remembered that.
Wow. That is crazy, because you would have only been 2 or 3 at the time.
2.5.
2.5, yeah. That's fascinating how you've remembered that. It's crazy. Very good memory, Byron. So you're from Texas?
Yes.
You said that you're from Texas, and look, with these stories, you know, there's as you say, there's hundreds of stories on YouTube. I've spoke to a few people that have stories, and some people, when they're telling me certain things, you think to yourself, no. But when I was speaking to you, you know, your story did stand out to me, and I jumped at the chance to get you on. So can you explain to people your first experience with abduction, alien abduction?
Yes. My first experience was in 1956, and I was 6 years old. Mama took me into the bedroom every night to put me to bed. And on this particular night, she took me in, and I watched her leave. And when I turned around to lay down to go to sleep, there were three little men down at the foot of my bed. And I called them in. I didn't know what to call them. So I yelled for her to come in there, and she did. And when she got in there, they were gone. This happened the very same way the next night, and the very same way the next night, except the third night, when she came in, she sat down on the bed and she said, "Son, I don't want you to call me in here anymore, because when you do, they're not going to be here. You're going to just have to learn to deal with them yourself. Now you need to go to sleep." And she left the room, and this time they were back.
Wow.
And there was an extra being there that was very tall, about 6-7 feet tall, and he was over in the shadows in the room. And he looked a lot like Captain Hook from
Peter Pan.
Cartoon, Peter Pan. And he danced around the room, and the bed, it seemed to rotate slowly, and the walls of the room got bigger and bigger. The room got bigger, and I couldn't move. And I was really getting upset about being unable to move, but I could move my eyes a little bit, and I could see there weren't any ropes around me. It was very confusing. Then I was about to freak out, and they were gone. The room was back to the normal size, and I could move again. So I went to bed, I went to sleep, pulled the covers over my head. And after that, I pulled the covers over my head because I figured if they came back, I didn't want to see them. So I didn't see them again. And I sort of forgot. I didn't forget what happened, but I didn't dwell on it. There was nobody I could talk to about it. My parents wouldn't talk about it. And I didn't know that I was an abductee at that time. In fact, that word wasn't in my vocabulary.
That's a very traumatic experience for a young boy to go through. And looking back. Sorry, go ahead, Byron.
They didn't scare me, but I have been claustrophobic ever since. I hate to be confined in any way. And I've almost been in some fights when people tried to grab me and hold me against my will. I'll just go sort of ballistic.
Yeah. And just to sort of ask a few questions about that there. I have to ask these questions, Byron. And as I say, I've spoke to Byron behind the scenes. Lovely man. He's a gentleman. And, you know, as I say, I've spoke to a lot of people with similar stories, but you really did stand out, Byron. And that's why I said to myself, I have to get you on. But the question does need to be asked. And it's a question that I watch on other channels, and people get criticized from the host that they don't ask these questions. But do you think, looking back, that could have been sleep paralysis? It could have been a child's imagination, or what? Because 6 years of age is so young, and all you're growing up. You know the way you get growing pains, you have dreams. Could have been that, or was it so vivid that it was definitely real?
It was so vivid. Plus, it happened 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they were there at the first. They didn't come back except the third day.
Yes.
I even thought about, was this a dream? And then I'm going, no, it's not a dream. Mama was in here. I know it happened.
And plus, then you would have asked your mother, you know, she would have given you confirmation that something, you were talking about these things, and you did get up and you didn't go to sleep, as you say. So it's a polarizing subject, and it's like, what is real and what isn't real. But whenever you were telling me this story, it was like, it's so hard not to believe. I tried not to believe your story, but the way you were explaining and you were talking about it, you weren't gaining anything really from this throughout your life. And it's like, it's really hard not to believe your story. So it was that when you were 6 years of age, was that it only happened 3 times and then it went away for a period and it came back? Can you fill us in between 6 and the next time you had your experience?
Well, it either went away I think it didn't go away. I think they just blocked me from remembering it.
Right.
And the next time I had an experience with them, well, I've had things happen that seemed fantastical, but I had no way of explaining how they happened except maybe God or something like that. But there was an event that happened in 1961. There's a song that's titled, "Does Your Chewing Gum Lose Its Flavor in the Bedpost Overnight?" And it was popular in England at that time, and it became popular in the United States. That song played in my head over and over and over and over one night, and I couldn't sleep at all. And Mom came in to get me to go to school, and I said, "I can't go to school. I didn't sleep any." And she said, "What do you mean?" And I told her what happened. And she took me into the living room and sat me down on the sofa with a soft drink and TV on. She said, "You watch TV and you do not go to sleep, because you're going to go to sleep tonight and you're going to go to school tomorrow." Wow. Then she went into the kitchen, and she stopped and made a phone call. There was a phone next to the kitchen door in the dining room. And then she went on in there. Later that day, about 4 o'clock, my father came home. He got off work, and he was a prison guard in Seagoville, where we lived at that time. He came in and he went and got my mother, and he took her into the kitchen where I couldn't see him, and they had some kind of a conversation. Then he came back in and he sat down and he said, "Son, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to have to take you to a psychiatrist." And he started telling me that we don't talk about ourselves. We don't talk about what's going on. He said, "I didn't even know anything that happened to my parents when I wasn't with them." And he said, in the late 1800s or early 1900s, one of your ancestors was put in an insane asylum because she said that little men came into her room at night and talked to her. Now, he remembered when I saw those little men, but at that point, I didn't remember it. So I'm wondering, what the heck is he talking about and why? And then once again, he said, "You don't talk about yourself." Well, he said, "She died in that asylum, and you don't want that to happen to you.
Wow.
So you just better straighten up." So that showed me that he remembered what happened to me. And he knew about the little men, and my mother knew about them.
Wow. So something stood out to me there, Byron, right? And what age were we up to now? What age were you there?
11.
11 years of age. But something really stands out there. So you had a family member in the 1800s, early 1900s, who went to an insane asylum because she told a story about little men visiting her at nighttime. Just sort of a similar experience to what you had. Now, I can't help to think that when you hear something like that, it's not a coincidence that happened. So either, I just have to say it how the viewers will see this, either both you and your relative are insane, or both you and your relative have had a similar experience with abduction.
Right.
And you could possibly have been chosen as a family line for whatever reason.
That's exactly what I believe.
Because it's clear, like I've spoke to you, and you're not insane. You're not. I can categorically say it. You're not insane. And it's this. I didn't know that part, and that's really shocked me. So you've actually had a family member that happened to. Wow, that's crazy. So yeah, go ahead with the story, Byron. Sorry.
I actually saw a UFO that year, and I saw it with a class. But nobody talked about it afterwards. I was in music class, and it was about March or April, and our teacher was sick, and a woman substituted, and she was very young, never seen her before. We live in a small town. And she said, since it was so pretty, we were going to go outside. So, and we were going to do calisthenics.
Mm-hmm.
So we got outside and we started doing side straddle hop. We were out in the sun where it was hot. She was under the shade of a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Over the tree, suddenly a ship came into view.
Can you describe the ship? Like what it looked like if it was close enough? He's going to show us the ship. Wow. What I'll do is what I'll do is, Byron, I'll actually get you to send a photo and I'll put it up at the screen at that time for people to see a clear image. But that looked like a submarine type figure.
It looked like a submarine with the battle deck of the battleship Missouri attached to the bottom of it. And I knew both of those. It looks like a nuclear submarine, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was up above the tree, and
Mm-hmm.
just the front end of it was sticking out. And then it was gone. And she said, that was nothing. Now let's get back to work. Now, what was funny is she'd been standing under the tree. She couldn't see it, but she knew it was there.
And did you make her aware of what you could see?
No, nobody said anything. That's why it was funny that she said, no, that was nothing. Let's get back to work. And then
wow.
Almost immediately, the school bell rang and it was time to go. So there was about 30 minutes of missing time.
Oh, wow. So you've came out of school and then it only seems like, how many minutes does it seem like you're in that area for?
It seemed like we were there for about 15 minutes and we should have been there for an hour.
Wow. And you've lost 45 minutes?
Yes. 30 to 45 minutes.
Wow. So you believe that, I'm just going to react to that. So you think maybe that was, you were seeing the ship that maybe had lifted you?
They may have taken us.
That's now, crazy, Byron.
I didn't talk to anybody else that talked about it, but a few years ago, I talked to an old classmate of mine on Facebook, and she said she remembered that happening because she'd been sick and not at school, but when she came back, a couple of people told her about it.
So you weren't the only witness to this?
Right.
And did they all also have a feeling of time loss?
I don't know. I didn't get to talk to anyone that actually saw it.
Mm-hmm. But you had that feeling of, yeah, you had that feeling of time loss anyway.
Well, we did about 5 side straddle hops, and then it appeared. And then before we could do any more, when she said get back to work, the bell rang and it was time for us to go.
That's crazy. That's absolutely, that's mind-blowing. And look at researching this a little bit. It's a common theme with credible abductees like yourself, because there's a lot of people that aren't credible. They're just in it for whatever. But the credible abductees like yourself, there's a common theme of time loss. And they talk about certain scenarios where they would, 1 minute they're in one place and they're in the same place, but then it's a different time of the day and they've lost maybe 4 or 5 hours or 45 minutes. It's a common theme, and it's fascinating. And you're 11 years of age at this. What's that in school, in American school?
6th grade.
6th grade. So you're still a
young, 5th or 6th.
You're still a young man, and you're experiencing this. This is the time of your life that you're just coming into puberty, and you don't know what's going on, and you're telling these experiences to your actually your mother and your father's telling you don't talk about these, so everything's getting locked in. You maybe don't have an outlet. Do you feel at this time, from 6 to 11, if you had sort of like somebody that you could speak to, it would have been a lot better?
Oh, definitely.
And you were locking this in from 6 to 11, not really speaking about it to too many people?
See, I didn't know about aliens. I didn't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Roswell would have happened, but it wasn't talked about very much.
Mm-hmm.
Like the term missing time, I'd never heard that before. In 1971, my wife and I went to Austin, and it's a 5-hour drive to Austin. We went up there and spent the night, and we came back the exact same way. And when we got in the house, we didn't have a clock in the car. When we got inside the house, we found out the trip back had taken 9 hours, but it didn't seem like it. So we lost 4 hours on that trip.
So there's multiple time losses throughout your whole life. Wow. Well, what we'll do is we'll scrape it back a wee bit to 11, because I want to get the full story for the audience, and I want to know the full story myself. So we're up to 11 now, and where are we progressing from here?
Do what now?
So where are we going from here? From 11 years of age, what's the next moment, a significant moment in your life in regards to aliens?
Probably when I was in high school. 1969. The next missing time happened in 1970. I worked at a summer camp in 1970 during the summer. And we played guitars, me and the other three counselors. We played guitars one night out behind the main lodge. And we played till about midnight. It was a Saturday night, and almost everybody was gone, but there were some kids left there, and they were listening. So we got everybody to go to bed, and we went to bed. And I climbed into my bunk and settled down, and I turned over. And the minute I hit the other side, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. So I'm going, it took me 6 hours to turn over. How is that possible?
So you were lying on one side.
Asleep.
And did you feel like, do you know the way, like if you have sleep, you know you've had sleep. Did you, whenever you, so you're lying there and you turn round, and whenever you turn round, it took 6 hours. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's impossible.
Well,
I felt real sleepy.
Yeah.
I felt real sleepy when I got into bed, like I was going to go to sleep.
Yes.
But the minute the sun coming up, I wasn't tired anymore.
Like you got a full night's sleep?
Or something.
Right, I'm going to have to ask you a question now, Byron, right? Can you remember anything about that missing time? Is there any flashbacks? Is there anything in this time frame that you can remember? Anything at all?
No.
Wow.
I just remembered seeing the ceiling and the bed and the walls as I turned over.
But throughout any experience that you've ever had throughout your whole life, has there ever been a time where you can remember something about in that missing time, like a flashback, a memory of maybe if you were on a ship or if you were in a place, it's just missing time and that's it?
The only thing is I've been hypnotized, and I felt like I remembered something then about being in a ship. Like that night in the hypnotist session, a ship landed in the main yard, and they took all of us that were there. There weren't many of us there, 10 or 15 people. They took us and took us on board a ship. And I don't know what they did.
Did you see any figures? Did you see any people? Did you see any entities? What, or was it just the ship?
Just the ship.
Wow.
I don't remember. I would be lying if I said I did.
Well, this is the thing, Byron, right? And I have to stress this to people. whenever I was looking into other stories, people really wanted to go into detail about what the aliens look like. You're not really relaying that to the public. You're just relaying a course of events that have happened throughout your life, and you're not trying to dramatize anything or sort of big something up. You're telling a story here, and I think that's what makes it a credible story, in my opinion. And it's just fascinating, this time thing, because the missing time thing is a massive one. In your opinion, right? Obviously, we don't know about technology and all these things. In your opinion, how are they doing this? Do you think it's something to do with a technology they have, or is this something they can do themselves? Just your personal opinion on that.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think they're very psychic, but now I did see them in 2009.
Oh, so you've seen them?
Yes. In 2009 is when I found out that I was an abductee. And
Wow.
well, I'll tell you the whole story. I was going home from eating dinner in town, and I was stopped at a stoplight in front of Walmart on a main highway. And all of a sudden, a silver globe that looked like it was made out of water, about the size of a soccer ball, appeared floating in the air at the end of the stoplight. And I was stopped because the light was red. Suddenly it flattened out and became about 3 foot from side to side and 3 foot from top to bottom, this disc. And it was about 2 or 3 inches thick, swirling water. And it looked like the Stargate from the movie Stargate with Kurt Russell. I looked around at the people in the cars next to me, and nobody was looking at it. I closed my eyes and it disappeared. I moved my head from side to side and it stayed right where it was. I was trying to see if I was hallucinating or not, but it seemed to be totally real. And just as the light changed, it exploded without any sound. It exploded out, but it disappeared before it hit the ground. Well, I went home and I called a friend and told him about it. And he didn't have anything to say, which was sort of unusual. Now, and he researched stuff. A week later, on the same day, the same thing happened. And I went home, but I didn't call my friend. I call him Frank in the book. I didn't call him, but the next day we talked about it. And I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Do you really want to know?" And I said, "Yeah, I really want to know." And he said, "Well, I think you're abducted by aliens." And I told him I thought he was crazy. And he said, see, I had told him all of my stories that had happened to me in the past. And so he had actually been listening when I thought that he hadn't. Well, he told me, he wrote down some addresses to some websites, and he told me to go look at them. And it took me about a week before I wanted to look at them, and I did. And they had these list of 99 questions that if you answered most of them, you were most likely an abductee. Well, I answered all of them except the ones that were for women with a yes. And then I started thinking about it. Well, I decided that if they were abducting me, that it should be reciprocal, that I should get something out of it. So one day in the same time period, I walked back and forth under this electric line that goes through my woods, and I kept saying, I want to know what y'all are doing to me. I want to know what you're doing to me. I know you're taking me. I want to know what you're doing to me. And I said, I'm going to keep asking you this every day for the rest of my life. Well, I did it all that week. And then I went and played a gig at a restaurant near where I live called the Country Kitchen. I played some country western songs, and it was the first time that I'd played since I was in high school, and it was terrible. I forgot the words to the songs, and this guy from the audience came up and he said, "Give me your guitar, and I'm going to play your guitar, and you get your book and you read the words and you sing." So we did that. Well, anyway, I got home. I was real hyper from the experience, and I couldn't go to sleep. Mm-hmm. So I decided to use a CD that will put you to sleep. And I put it on, and I sort of fell asleep. Then I woke up, and at first I could see it on the wall like a holograph, that there were these three little beings like the ones I had seen when I was a child, and a tall one that had a large head, and he looked a lot like a praying mantis wearing a robe. And they took me and put me on a table, and then part of the time I felt like I was with them, and part of the time I thought I was seeing them. And a friend of mine who's a researcher, Daryl Sims, the alien hunter, told me they can make us see through their eyes if they want to.
Well, so did they take you to another place, or was this in the?
It was on a ship.
Wow.
And I saw myself, and suddenly it turned into black and white, like black and white photography. And then it turned into X-ray. And Daryl has told me that they can see in X-ray. And before it turned into X-ray, it panned in to where it was from here to my knees. And I couldn't see the little men, or I would have been able to see inside of them too. That's why they made it pan in, so they didn't show me that. And they did the anal probe on me. I could see it in the X-ray. And then I woke up, and everything was back to normal.
So were you aware of these like being anally probed?
Yes.
Wow.
For a brief moment. And the next morning I woke up, well, before I went to sleep, I drew that guy, the one that looked like a praying mantis with a robe on. I drew him and I put it down. Next morning I woke up and I started crying. I mean, I wasn't upset, but I just couldn't stop crying. And I cried for almost 30 minutes. And I didn't know what it was, except I guess it was releasing something inside of me. Well, later that day, I went over to Frank, and I told him what had happened. And he said, he believed me. And I said, well, I think it was just a dream. And he said, no. And I said, well, look, I've got this picture of this guy that I can show to you, and this will show that it's just a dream. Because for some reason I didn't want it to be real. Well, I handed it to him, and he turned around to his computer and typed in some stuff, and there was a picture of the exact same being that a child had drawn, the praying mantis with the robe on, from when the child had been abducted.
So there's two similar pictures, and you've the creature that you, or the alien that you have seen, sort of is the same type of alien that a child has sort of drawn. Also, that's absolutely fascinating. And in your opinion, Byron, why are they doing tests on humans?
I really don't have the faintest idea.
It's a strange one. If you think,
I've tried to get them to tell me stuff. I've tried to trick them. One day, because I've had a few communications with them psychically, but they're always very brief. And one day I thought I'll ask him this question and he'll tell me, and then I'll know something. And I said, tell me why you've saved my life so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we wanted you alive. And then he was gone. And I'm going, of course you want to be alive.
Is that
You didn't tell me anything.
Are you seeing that, or are you just hearing that?
I can hear him. There's one that's spoken to me before. He's warned me about car accidents. He was the one in the at one point when I was on the table, I was getting ready to start freaking out, and he said, don't be upset, be calm. And I was instantly calm. Anyway,
that's fascinating.
I remembered his voice.
An English speaking sort of. It's English speaking.
Yes.
And what does it have? Does it have an accent, or does it American?
See, they don't. It's like American without an accent, but they speak in your head. It's psychic communication. They don't talk.
Yeah, it's like that voice in the back of your head that's speaking to you, but it's actually communicating with you this time. It's not you speaking. It's actually something tapping into your subconscious. Yeah, that's. So do you know what we'll do? You have so many encounters with these. So what we'll do is we'll go through them all, because I think that's a good way to do it, because it'll cut out all the middle pieces, and it'll, obviously, if you want to talk about other scenarios and stories, what we can do is you can come back and you can tell a full sort of thing from start to finish. But do you know what we'll do? We'll go through all the experiences. I think that's a really good way of doing it. What age were you whenever that experience happened?
That it was in 2009, and I was born in 1950, so I can't do the math right now, to be truthful.
But you would have been obviously you were a grown man in 2009.
I was about 59.
59 years of age. So you would have known. Just a question for you that popped into my head. So in 2009, you're saying that you didn't know about sort of abduction and things like that, but would you not have seen that in movies, or the internet was about then too? Would you not have picked up about abduction and things like that through your experiences, like even going to the movies?
I saw the one where they go to that volcano here,
a Close Encounter of the Third Kind.
Close Encounter of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
But they didn't really talk about alien abductions in that movie. And I did see one, Communion, but I just didn't think that it was about me.
Yeah, well, there's another one. Obviously, I didn't want to bring it up. We're not here to talk about movies, but there was one that really stood out in my head when I was listening to your story and just hearing what you've had to say there. I forget the name of it, but there's an owl in this movie, and it's in Alaska, and there's time, people that are abducted, time goes missing in this, and it's very sort of similar to what you were saying. I don't know if you've seen it. I forget the name of it. I apologize, but I'll get the name for you and I'll tell you. So that was in 2009, right? But prior to that, that's when you're 56. So from when you're 11 to 56, I know that's a big time period. Have you had similar sort of experiences to that? What was it like after 11, like your teenage years and then into your 20s and 30s and so on?
Well, mostly things happened like a friend of mine in 69, I was 19, we were driving in a car and it was nighttime and we were out having a good time. It was real dark because there was clouds. We were in a Volkswagen that had brand new tires, and we came up on this a hill that came over to the edge of the road, and we couldn't see around it. And we were going about 77 miles an hour because a VW will ride pretty good. Well, one of the tires blew out. They were brand new tires. One of the tires blew out. So we had to stop and we had to change the tires. And then we got back in the car and we started up, but now we're only going about 20 miles an hour when we go around that hill. And all over the road were cows.
Mm-hmm.
They were standing all in the road. There was about 8 cows in the road. We would have
Mm-hmm.
plowed. Excuse me. We would have plowed right. We would have plowed right into them at 70 miles an hour. We would have been killed.
Yeah.
Now, one of my favorite stories of how my life was saved was in 1971, and I was in college I was in junior college in Athens, Texas, and I played in the band. And we were playing at homecoming. We finished, the thing was basically over. Everybody was just standing around talking. Well, I started talking to this guy that I vaguely knew. I was standing talking to him, and my back was to the crowd. And suddenly someone tapped me on my left shoulder, and I turned around to look at him, and I was getting ready to go, you know, why are you interrupting me talking to somebody? I don't even know you. It's pretty rude. But before I could say anything, we had a cannon that they set off at every pep rally. The cannon went off. It was real loud. And I felt a stream of air rush right along my back where my shirt was up a little bit from my pants. And I saw the man I'd been talking to crumble onto the ground. And a big crowd of people gathered around him. Now, what had happened was, since it was homecoming, the boys running the cannon decided to put a double load of powder and a double load of wadding. Now, if they'd only put double powder and not double wadding, nothing would have happened bad. But because of the double wadding, the back of the cannon blew up, and it sent 3 pieces of shrapnel into walls of 2 buildings, and 1 piece about the size of a hardball into the pelvis of that guy that I'd been talking to. Now, it would have hit me right in the base of the spine if that person hadn't tapped me on the shoulder. I never saw him again. I'd never seen him before. And it was a very small school. We usually knew almost everybody or had seen everybody. I turned around to say, hey, you may have just saved my life. And he was gone.
What did he look like?
Just like a regular college student. Well,
and did you witness this college student before? Did you know his face? It was just a random person tapped you on the shoulder for no reason, and if he hadn't have, you would be paralyzed now.
Right. I'd never seen him before. A lot of people said he was an angel. And I didn't know, but it was really strange. But now, knowing that they can put an alien on the ground and make him look like a person, see, they can change your perception and make you see whatever they want you to see. So they can disguise themselves. They're really just disguising in your mind. They're not making themselves look different.
Well, what do you think about the sort of the hypothesis that there's multiple different species? So like there's the gray aliens, there's the lizard ones, and apparently they're the ones that can shapeshift. There's the cloud ones, apparently that don't come down to earth. But obviously the ones that we're more familiar with is the lizard and the grays. Do you think that's a thing, or do you think it's just one species?
No, I think they're different. Well, the mantis is also, he's often with the grays. He's their boss. He tells them what to do.
Right.
So there's an insectoid race, and some of them look like mantis. And if they have a robe on, then they're of a higher rank.
And do you think that they can shapeshift, or they can sort of make you perceive something out from your eyes that isn't real, like disguise themselves with your own head? Or do you think some of them actually know how to shapeshift?
I think it's both. Some can, and some do it with their mind. Now, in around 76 or 77, I was fishing over at a pond near my house, and I heard this real loud jet airplane, and it came over the tops of the trees, which means it was only 50 feet up, and it looked like a U.S. Air Force Blue Angel. Now, I thought the Blue Angels were an Air Force airplane. They're not. They're a Navy plane. This one looked like that, and it dipped down over the pond and came along, and suddenly it shifted, going real slow motion, and the pilot looked down at me, and I could read all of the writing on the airplane, and
Wow.
then it just shot off and was gone. I told people about that, and one day one guy goes, "Hey man, Blue Angels are Navy." So they took that image out of my mind, what I thought it looked like, and they made me see what I thought it looked like, but probably what I was looking at and didn't realize it was a UFO.
So do you think
saucers.
they have maybe, and another way of explaining this, they've monitored human civilization for a long time. They know about airplanes, they know who we are, they know about sort of our structures and our inventions, and they've took something like an image that they know that we would probably see like an airplane, and they've sort of made the alien craft look like a Navy plane.
I think they took it out of my mind.
Right.
They read my mind. And that's why they made it look like an Air Force ship.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I thought it was Air Force.
Yeah, they've extracted the real image from your mind and replaced that with the image of a Navy plane. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
Another time, I was coming home from town, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and there was a car behind me, and it was this big green old Plymouth. And for some reason, I felt afraid of it, but I couldn't take my eyes off of it. And suddenly it stood up on its tail behind me in the road, and I could see underneath it. And it rotated towards the edge of the road, and it fell.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's impossible for a car to do. Well,
of course, yeah.
I flipped out and I drove home. And when I got home, my wife said that I was late. And I told her what had happened. And she said, "Well, did you see if anybody was hurt?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, you ought to go check on them." So I went back. It took me about 5 minutes to get there. Now, we live about 25 miles from town. So it would have taken a wrecker at least 25 minutes to get there. But they would have had to go from that car to a telephone. You know, we didn't have cell phones at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And the car was gone, but there were about 5 small pine trees, and they were all bowed over, like something had bowed them over.
And did you go there with your wife?
No, I went by myself.
By yourself? And did anybody else witness the trees like that?
I don't think so. I don't know. I didn't ask anybody.
Yeah. I mean, why the car though? Why do that at that time? Everything seems to be very random, but it seems like there's organization to it also. I believe you've got scars over your body due to our little things on your body, like your hand. You sent me a picture of your hand where there's like was that your hand of like a triangle? Yes. What can you show that? I don't know if the viewers can see it. Have you got that in your hand now?
It's not in my hand anymore. It went away.
You showed like the picture was there. There was a scar on your hand, and then it just disappeared.
Yeah, after a few days.
And that was a scar that was burnt into your skin.
Well, no, it wasn't burned. It was just, I don't know how it was made. It wasn't really a scar. It It was a discoloration, but it was triangular shaped.
Like a bruise sort of thing.
And it had 3 punctures, one on each corner of the triangle.
Well, what I'll do is
like
I'll put that on the screen for people to see briefly, and you can pause. I'll put it on for a couple of seconds now, and then people can pause it and have a look themselves. But that wasn't a scar. That actually went away. And so just let's talk about the physical aspects of things. Whenever you've got missing time or something like this happens, would it be quite a common thing for you to wake up with certain little ailments or marks on your body?
Yes. Round bruises are very common, and they're about the size of a quarter or a $half. And punctures, there'll usually be 3 or 6 punctures. One time I had 21 punctures on my wrist, 3 rows of 7. And they're about the size of a hypodermic needle.
Wow.
And some people have had scratches or scars. I've never had the scratches or scars.
That's actually quite frightening.
Well,
so
at least I didn't remember.
Yeah, well, so that's how many scenarios is that? So from 50, here's a question I have to ask. From 56, right? Is there any more between that period, any more stories you want to tell in that period from 56 to 11 that we're missing, that you want to speak now about before we move by sort of your later years in life? What's the one we were talking about and you were telling me you were playing a gig and your body sort of moved? You went to trip over a lead.
Oh.
That one's quite fascinating.
Oh, well, first I'd like to tell you about the car accident where I was hit by a car.
Yes, tell me those 2 stories, yes, because we forgot about them. These are the ones that Byron spoke about to me before coming on here, and these are really fascinating stories. So you choose which one to start off with, Byron.
Let's do the car. I was 13 years old, and I was riding my bicycle home. And I was with other kids. We were all in a row. And I saw that a car was heading straight for me. And it was coming over the median line, coming over and coming straight for me. And then all of a sudden I was on the ground and I was rolling head over heels. And my head would come up and I'd see the ground, then I'd see the tire, and I'd see the bumper right here in front of me, then I'd see the car light, then I'd see the sky, and then it again, and then one more time, 3 times. And then my body straightened up and I flew through the air. Wow. And I went between the top 2 rows of barbed wire fence. And the car came to a halt on the other side of the fence. I think it sort of hit one of the posts and bent it over. But I had no recollection of being hit. Well, they took me to the hospital to observe me because they said sometimes you can be hurt and not know it till the next day. But I was fine, so they let me come home. My teacher's husband had hit me. I passed that year real easy. Her husband is the one that hit me. And
he hit you with the car. He hit you with the car. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, and you passed. Oh yeah, yeah.
My dad said I had a new bike, and I said, but I like my old bike. And he said, well, you've got a new one. So we got home, and there on the front porch was an American Flyer with a buddy seat, light, the fake gas tank, streamers coming out of the handlebars, beautiful red and white one, and big. And I said, well, now I've got 2 bikes. Dad said, come here. So he took me around the driveway. He took me around the side of the house to the carport. And there was my old bike and it was leaning against the wall. And if you looked at it from above, it was like this.
Crumpled.
It was bowed.
Like a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine like a bow. It was bent. It was bent in like an impact, like it's been hit. So roughly, a question for you. Roughly, what speed did he hit you at?
Probably 35, 40 miles an hour.
So death speed. To me, people think 35, 40 mile an hour isn't actually very fast, but that's inside a car, doesn't seem, but it's very fast to be hit, and especially at what age were you when you were hit? 13 on a bike.
13.
That is, and did you have a helmet?
No, we didn't wear helmets.
So you got hit at 13 years of age. You came off your bike 40 miles an hour. You went flying into a barbed wire fence, I believe.
Right.
And
I went through it.
Went through
it. Left a scar. I guess you can't see the scar.
No, we'll believe you.
I can't do it in front of the camera right now.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. Don't worry, Byron. No, we'll believe. And you, just to break it down for the audience, you can't remember any of it, and you weren't hurt.
Well, I remember rolling. I don't remember being hit, and it hit right where I was, where the bike seat was the middle of the crescent. Right.
See, I wouldn't be worrying too much about not remembering being hit, because that's sometimes the brain can take away traumatic experiences to sort of protect ourselves. Science has taught us that. But what fascinates me is you weren't physically hurt, were you? Apart from the scar.
That's it. One prong of the barbed wire fence dipped into my arm, and I didn't even feel it. It all happened so fast.
And why do you believe you weren't hurt?
I think that the aliens took me off of my bike when it got hit. I think they knew. You see, they know our future and our past. Psychically, they know these things. And
time travel.
Also, we have implants, so they can see what I see. They can hear what I hear. They know that I'm talking to you right now. They can see you with me looking at you.
Wow, that's freaky. Well, listen, what I will say is, if there is, and I mean this, I don't want any sort of missing time or any of that. That'll freak me out. But look, if you're listening to me, Mr. Alien, or whatever species you are more than welcome to come and do a podcast with me. But I don't want any missing time, and I don't want any of those little funny things that you do, marks over the body or anal probing or any of that. Just a normal podcast. We'll have a chat, we'll have a talk, and we'll clear the air, and we can introduce you into the population as a good species of alien, not hostile.
Now, what was the other thing that you had mentioned?
So, right. So you told me a story. There's so many, because yourself, there's so many stories you've told me before this. There was one, you were you were doing a gig, and there was something on the floor, and you tripped, and hundreds of people seen you do some sort of weird act, and you didn't have control of your body.
Now in the car accident, I couldn't move. As I was rolling. I couldn't move. I couldn't change anything. And if I had, I probably would have been killed. Well, in this situation, which happened like 47 years later, I also couldn't move. But I was coming down off the stage after I had sang 3 songs with the guitarist to give him a break. He was sort of a one-man band. And I realized my left foot was caught under the speaker cables, heavy duty ones, and I was going to trip, and I was going to fall, and the stage was about 1 foot to 1.5 foot off of the ground, off of a concrete floor, and I was going to fall over and land on my head. Well, all of a sudden, I couldn't move, but my body kept moving. My right foot pushed up into the air, and my left foot went down, and the cables dropped off. And my right foot, as it was pushing down too, it spun me around, and I landed down. And it was like I was set down on the floor instead of landing. And I couldn't move any of this. I tried doing that at home, and I could do the move, but when I'd land, I'd fall backwards, and I had to put my foot back to catch myself because of the force of moving.
So technically, that act was sort of physically for a human to do that act would probably take sort of an athletic, sort of acrobatic background, but you done this act effortlessly without even trying, and you didn't even have control of your own body.
Right. I couldn't. And the whole audience, now it looked so weird. The whole audience was dead quiet. There was about 100 people in there, and they were just totally quiet. And the guitar player, he said, "Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, that was all practiced." And
wow.
Of course, that was all rehearsed. Of course, it wasn't. He knew it wasn't, and I knew it wasn't.
That's a question I have for you. Friends. So you've obviously you're a very popular guy. You've got your wife, and you've got a wife. You've got friends. You've had a life. Whenever you're, for instance, your wife or your friends. So was your wife supportive of these experiences that you've had? Was your friend supportive with these experiences that you've had? And what was it like telling friends and telling your wife these experiences?
Well, now we divorced we were married 14 years. We were married in 71. So we divorced in 84, and I haven't had any contact with her since then. But so one day she said, "You hurt yourself while you're asleep more than any person I've ever seen," talking about the bruises and things. Because she would see the bruises on me in the morning. And, we thought maybe I got up and walked around the house in my sleep or something, but that didn't make any sense. So
I'm just thinking of something. And I'll actually ask that question later on when we get into your sort of the later years of your life. But how did your friends take this? Did you have friends that disbelieve? Did you have friends that fully believe? What's the sort of your area's opinion of your experiences?
Well, they were the ones that would say, "Boy, God must have a special purpose for you," or "Angels saved you." They didn't think aliens. They thought it was angels, spirit guides, ghosts, or God.
Well, who's to say it isn't the same thing? Because it could be, as we say, you've got all these biblical stories, you've got the Bible, you have the Quran, you have all these different religions, and they're talking about God. But are we talking about God, or maybe what are we talking about? Maybe we're talking about aliens. Look at the pyramids, for instance. It goes without saying, if you want proof of sort of out of, in my opinion, that you go back to 4,000 to 8,000 years ago, they think the pyramids, they think the Sphinx now is maybe older than 6,000 years old, just through sort of water dating. It's always been updated. That if you look at that, if you look at the way we were back then, I mean, something has went on in our past to have these type of structures. Do you know what I mean? It'd be very hard to build a structure like that today, never mind thousands of years ago. So there has been some intervention. There has been some type of influence. There's been an influence of something. Now we don't know what it is, but with people like yourself with these experiences, and it's hard not to think that there is definitely something out there. But then when you hear people like yourself, it's like are these creatures are they looking at us from the outside? What are they doing? But you think they're friendly though, don't you?
Yes, for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Is there other species, do you think, that aren't so friendly, but or are they all friendly?
Well, some people have horrible experiences. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them, like me, they don't let me remember anything where they hurt me, like where I've gotten the bruises, the punctures. I don't remember any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's just a medical exam, it's got to hurt. I mean, I've been hurt by earth doctors,
Well, yeah,
doing stuff
that's
to
yeah.
me.
Another thing that stood out about your story, Byron, is that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a stat analyst, I don't know about these things, but you did have, as you spoke about at the start of the podcast, you did have cancer at the age of 2, and that was removed. Now, looking up certain stats on the internet, everybody's a specialist these days with a laptop and a phone. I noticed that anybody that gets cancer really young, it tends to come back, or anybody that gets cancer at all, it tends to come back. But you got cancer really young, it was removed, and the tumor was removed. It was a malignant tumor, and it was removed, and it didn't come back. Now, I actually think you come into a very rare category of people that get cancer so young, and I believe you're 77 now. That's actually quite astonishing.
72.
72, sorry. That's quite astonishing to get to go through your whole life fit and healthy. From apart from the cancer, how has your health been throughout your whole life?
Well, I was more sickly as a child than an
Mm-hmm.
adult. Like I had bronchitis a lot. I had
Mm-hmm.
nosebleeds a lot,
Mm-hmm.
different things.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved away from home, my mother smoked, so I think a lot of the bronchitis and everything came from her smoking cigarettes around us.
Mm-hmm. And
But my health,
do you credit sort of not the cancer not coming back and you sort of living a healthy life? Do you credit that to yourself, or would you credit that to the aliens?
I don't know. I've never tried to make sure it didn't come back. I've never thought about it.
Yeah. Well, as you say, you're 72, and I mean, you're fit, you're healthy, and it's your life has been saved. You've told me basically your life has been saved on countless times by sort of an unknown force, and you believe it to be the aliens. And you know, how many times roughly do you think you've been abducted?
Oh gosh, there were several years where I had marks once a week,
Wow, that frequent.
or at least once a month. Let's say once a month. So that'd be 12 times a year. And then there were times when there were more than once in a month. So I would say 15 times in a year. So there's been quite a few times that I was visited.
And there are the times that you can sort of remember, and you don't know about the times that maybe you can't remember, because there's bound to be times maybe that you don't have any recollection at all, and there's been no marks on your body.
Right, I wouldn't know about it.
You wouldn't know about it at all. So it could, for all you know, it could be happening. It could be happening every night, and it's just certain times you're getting marks because they're doing different experiments. So you're realizing it at that time. That's absolutely fascinating. So another question I have to ask, right? And obviously the viewers, anybody sort of watching this right now, and guys, do us a favor, hit the likes, because this podcast deserves the likes. To give Byron the respect of coming on and telling this story. But one question I'm going to have to ask, because I know the viewers will sort of want me to ask this. Apart from your family member going to the insane asylum, I don't think she was insane though. Have you Are you on any medication? Have you ever been on any medication for any sort of mental health illnesses?
Depression.
Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's, I mean,
But not very often.
That's, well, listen, depression tablets. I mean, that's, I'm not, you know, what I'd be looking out there is for antipsychotic and bipolar, borderline personality borderline personality disorder. You have none of those things.
No.
Schizophrenia.
No.
So you've never been diagnosed with any of those things. You were, you know, you're in good health. You're regular at the doctor, and you're articulate in your story. You've told multiple abduction stories there, and without hesitation. And obviously, yes, I've maybe had to sort of get your memory back with a few things, but at the end of the day, you know, there's so many stories that you're going to forget some here and there. Now, what we're going to do is from 56 to 72. So that's sort of the later years of a person's life. I'm not saying you're old by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm saying that, you know, that's the you know, that's, you're getting into the later years. Are you still going through similar experiences through that time?
The last 2 or 3 years, I haven't had very many experiences.
Do you think that they're done with you?
No. The last spaceship I saw was in 2017, and I saw two at that time. One of them looked like a star, but it was in the atmosphere, and it was just hanging there, and then suddenly it shot off at a tremendous speed.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it from my car. The other one was I was out working on my house. It was early in the morning, and I thought, I'm working outside so much, I should take my camera with me. Well, this particular day, I didn't have it with me. I didn't remember it at all. I was working on a column, and I had to work on the back side of it from standing on a ladder on the front of it. So I did that, and I fixed it. Then I had to get down to look at it to see if I'd done it right. So I got down and I looked at it, and then something said, the voice in my head said, look up. So I looked up, and there was a huge spaceship hanging in the air, and it was cylindrical, and it was about 200 or 300 feet long, and it was level with the lowest hanging cloud. So it was about 1,200 feet up in the sky, and it was drifting slowly with the wind. There was a slight wind, beautiful blue sky. It looked like something out of National Geographic. And I reached around for my phone, excuse me, and I realized I didn't have it. So I said, I'm going to run in and get my phone. I hope y'all are back when I get here. And they weren't. They've gone. They knew I didn't have my phone.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that they've always chose their opportunities with abductees to maybe... Why do you think they do that to you? Because that's frustration. That's, they're toying with you. Do you think that you were abducted and you were left back and you can't remember? There was a bit of time difference or a bit of time missing? Or do you think they come back to check on certain abductees? What's your theory on that?
Well, I think they'd come back and check on certain abductees from time to time. I think it's probably the same ones all the time that are doing the marks. It could be different ones. Now, I've been told by a psychic that I'm visited by a lot of different ones because I put out different energy from most people.
Okay. Okay. And you mean, have you ever been to a psychiatrist? Well, you've been to hypnosis. You've been hypnotized before. I know some psychiatrists and psychotherapists use hypnosis to sort of heal the mind on maybe PTSD, people with PTSD. I mean, have you ever been to a psychiatrist to sort of understand your mind a bit better with all this?
No.
And you've no interest of going to somebody like that?
No.
Well, the hypnosis is a good one, because you know a professional will put you under the hypnosis, and they will literally go in deep into your mind with things that you can't even remember. Some stuff, when you were a kid, that you can't remember. You touched on it at the beginning, but do you think the hypnosis brought out more of the story? Do you think it helped, the hypnosis?
I think it did. It was a hypnotherapist, not a psychologist.
Yeah.
It was not a psychologist. And this particular hypnotherapist had talked with abductees before. I think a psychiatrist is just going to naturally want to look for you being sick and crazy. I don't think they're going to be open-minded and try and find out if there really are aliens. They're not going to believe it.
Well, there's two types. There's a psychotherapist who's completely different, and they don't want to do that. So I recently found out that if you go to a psychotherapist, they will actually just timeline and date everything for you, and regardless of what you tell them, whatever experiences or whatever you've been through in your life, they will talk to you. They'll not try to put you on any medication, I don't think, and they will just timeline your whole life and sort of break down certain parts of your life. And so I think it's the psychotherapy is, I've been told, is a lot better.
They're not any of those in Nacogdoches.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
They're just
regular. I mean, you don't seem to need any of those things. As I say, you've got no reason. The thing about it is, I'm listening to your story, and you're so articulate in telling your story and you're not hesitant, and you're not, you're explaining things in great detail. You're going into the sort of the minute detail of your stories, and it's an indication that, at the very least, Byron, at the very least, these experiences were real for you. So then I have to believe that some of those experiences were real. There's no other conclusion. Now, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, and you're going to get a lot of people in the chat, because there's going to be a live chat to this, that are going to be saying, "Oh, I don't believe in this," or "This guy's crazy," or whatnot. Do you get a lot of people giving you pushback on this story?
No. Most people believe me.
Wow. Have you ever had any pushback?
Not that I can remember.
Because you're an author of a book. You've got a book out. I mean,
I've never been criticized. I've never been called crazy.
Because you have guys like, I'm not saying crazy. I'm not saying people saying calling you crazy, but like, as I say, you've got a book out, and the link for Byron's book is in the comment section of this video. If you want to go and buy that book and read it, it's a fantastic story, and I suggest people go and buy that book. But I mean, when you're writing books and you live in a town and there's people around you and you're speaking to people, you're going to get some people that are a wee bit, skeptical about the situation. Is so everybody that you speak to, after you telling them your experiences, they believe you.
One person said, "I think you're wrong. I think that you believe what you're saying, but I don't think it's true." Now, over a period of months, he did a lot of research, because it was a good friend of mine. And at the end of about 4 or 5 months, he said, "Well, I think you're telling the truth."
Well, that's the sort of, as I say, we've spoke now for a while, and that's the sort of, you go into every story a wee bit skeptical about things, but after listening to you, it's like, as I say, it's a very articulate story. It's a very well, spoke about story. These are your experiences. So, has the government ever approached you about your story?
No.
and there's nobody from any outside influences approached the store. Obviously, you've wrote a book, but newspapers, magazines, online outlets have ever approached you?
Yeah. Now, I sent a copy of my book to a man that works at NASA, but he just sent me a letter back with the typical NASA line saying thank you, and it didn't put in their collection.
Yeah.
Russell Green, I believe, was his name. No. James L. Green,
Mm-hmm.
director of the Planetary Science Division.
Yeah, so I would say that maybe if you had a talk with that guy face to face, do you think people like himself would give you a bit of pushback on your experiences?
Well, it all depends on when you talk to him. Now, he might not, but before, when their hard line was that there are no aliens, of course he would have had to say that, whether he felt it or not.
So is it a common thing in America or in your town that aliens 100% do exist?
I'm sorry, do what
So
now?
for instance, in your town where you live, and sort of the general thought in America as a whole, would it be right in saying that in the United States and your town that they believe that aliens exist?
More and more people do now than ever before, because there's been so much come out from the Air Force, from the Navy, the Army,
Mm-hmm.
the government, things they're beginning to say.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, there's more people that believe it now than ever before.
Well, just to touch on that a little bit, I've got a tiny little bit of knowledge in that show. So during the pandemic, the Pentagon released information to the New York Times, which was verified, and it basically stated that they have craft not off this planet. And to break that down, what that means is they have craft that they found not off this planet, so it wasn't made on this planet. Now that's the Pentagon. The Pentagon released that information, and the New York Times, which is one of the most verified papers in the world, if not the most verified paper in the world, it's they printed that and they put it in a small article, and it was put way back in the pages, and somebody seen it, and obviously a load of people seen it, and they couldn't believe that this was posted during the pandemic. And they picked their time, but what people don't realize, in 2019, looking into this here, there was the limit was up for information that could be withheld to the public. So the Pentagon had to release information by 2019 to the public over, I think it was Freedom of Information Act in America. So
Yes.
classified files had to be released due to a law, and they were released. So to cover their own back, in my opinion, I do believe that all governments, not just the United States, Russia, America, Britain, Ireland, China, Australia, all of them had to sort of cover their backs and release articles saying that they were sort of they did have craft not of this world, and America was the first to do so. So big credit to that. I know that was a hard thing to do. But I want your view on another thing. So there's two opinions I want from yourself. One is Commander Fravor, and the second is Bob Lazar. Now we'll start off with Lazar. We spoke about him just briefly behind the scenes. What's your view on Bob Lazar?
I think he's completely legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that, I don't know much about him, but isn't he the one that had some drawings of what he thought ships looked like from Area 51?
Well, do you want me to? Well, do you want me to refresh your memory on Bob Lazar?
Yeah.
So Bob Lazar was a propulsion expert. He went through college and he got his degree, and the government picked up that he was a very smart man. I forget the name of the base that he was working in, but so the government approached him and said, "Listen, can you come and work for us?" And he said yes. And he had to fill out forms. And there was this silly form. It was something to do with aliens. It was talking about aliens on the form, just, you know, just filling out a wee form. And he says, well, it was quite common to get misinformation on these forms, just in case you left these top secret bases and then you went to the press and then you says, yeah, I was working on alien technology. And then the government could turn around and say, well, actually, no, that was the form. They felt out it wasn't that. And we just use this as a way of discrediting anybody that's that's trying to infiltrate us, like the Russians, the Cold War at the time. And he didn't think anything of it, but he went in, and to make a long story short, he went down into the room that they were working at, and he thought it was a magnet, and it was a sphere type object, and it was floating, and he thought it was magnetic. And his partner at the time, he says, no, that's not magnets. We don't know how this works. This is the power source to the ships. And Bob says, what do you mean the ships? He says, well, there's ships that you'll be seeing that were found in an archaeological dig. And he got to see the ships, and he says they were very small and everything was like molded. And this power source was made up of, I think, element 115. Now, everything that I've just told you there can be totally discredited. I've discredited that. There's one thing that you can't discredit, is element 115. In the 80s, element 115 wasn't an element. It wasn't put onto the periodic table. I don't even think people knew it existed. And whenever they sacked Bob Lazar and got rid of him and discredited his education, they says this man wasn't even educated, even though that he has newspaper clippings of him graduating from college and having all these degrees and being a very smart man. They says he couldn't be telling the truth because there's no such thing as element 115. Well, the strange thing about that is, in 2011, element 115 was added to the periodic table.
I've heard about that.
So it backs up Bob Lazar's story that he was telling the truth about that scenario, you know. And a lot of people still try to discredit Bob, but Bob never wanted any of this. They raid his house constantly. The SWAT teams raid his house constantly to this day. They get at him, and they've done similar things to his family and his friends. They've ruined his life, all because he was the whistleblower on what the American government were doing in regards to alien technology, back engineering alien technology.
I really don't pay much attention to anybody else's research. I'm just concerned about what happens to me and what I've seen and stuff like that. And but what little I've heard about him, especially the from the periodic table, that makes it seem very creditable to me.
Same.
And plus, why would they be raiding his house unless he actually had something?
Well, he stole an abundance of element 115 when he left the lab, I believe, and they're looking for that back. And he said no. So they keep raiding him right up until this day, and they've made his life a living hell. So there is things that go on, Byron, that we don't know about. And as I say, every story is different, and your story is absolutely fascinating. So I think we'll come to your life there. And as I say, you can come back if there's any more things maybe you've forgotten. You can come back on and do multiple ones with me. It would be an absolute pleasure. But so who you are today, what's it like living through those experiences? And do you expect any more experiences to happen throughout your life in the future?
I don't know if I expect, I hope. I think more things will happen. I still feel I have a connection with them, that they're still watching out for me.
In what way?
Well, they are like keeping me from being in car wrecks and stuff like that.
So do you always feel... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I asked them the other day to get me some kind of an interview, and you popped up on the website and wanted somebody to contact you, so I did.
So the other day you asked them for an interview, to be sort of put to tell your story online. And I popped up on the group, the Facebook group, asking was there anybody with experiences that wanted to tell their story.
Right.
Wow.
And I thought, well, there he is. So I wrote to you.
That's crazy, Byron. It's absolutely crazy. Spooky. It's spooky to think that, as you say, you think that these. Another question. Like these questions just keep popping up in my head. Do you think they're in control of you, like in some type of drone sort of, control like manner?
I don't know. I know they have been when they needed to save my life, but I don't think so. I think that there's nothing they would want for me in that way. I could be wrong.
It's fascinating that they can do that, though.
Yeah.
And you look, you have
my body.
You have said that they're peaceful. What do you think their end goal is?
I really don't have the faintest idea.
Any opinions, any theories, hypothesis, anything?
Well, I think that they're trying to help us evolve as a people, as a race, as individuals. And I think they're trying to usher us into where we'll be able to be a star-faring race eventually.
Do you think that they had a hand in human evolution?
I think it's possible, yes. I don't know. It's just my opinion, but I think they have.
Well, if you look, take away, put religion to one side. If you go back 12 million years ago, where apparently we're just monkeys and trees, and then you go to 6 million years ago, and we sort of came down from the trees, and we're a hominid species. We're starting to lift rocks. From 6 million years ago until now, actually the past 100,000 years has been so fast. Evolution's been so fast. It's hard to believe that there hasn't been some type of influence.
I agree.
It's crazy.
And our technology has sped up quickly. I mean, it wasn't long ago we didn't even have airplanes.
Yeah, so you're going back when's, the first plane was invented late 1800s, was it?
I think so.
Was the sort of structure for it was laid out, and until now, we have Wi-Fi. We have drones. We have all this technology. If we took one piece of technology back to the 1800s, they would think we're an alien. If we could go back in time. Right. So, I'm absolutely taken aback by your story. It's a fantastic story. It's a fantastic experiences that you've had. I'm very glad that your experiences haven't been all negative, apart from the certain traumatic experiences from your childhood. And I'm glad that you've sort of came to terms with it, and you accept that this happens to you, and you expect it to happen to you in the future. Byron, is there anything else you would like to talk about?
Not at this point.
And that's, it was absolutely fantastic for you to come on. And I think we'll end it there because, but guys, listen, do me a favor, hit the like buttons for Byron. And listen, if you want to buy Byron's book, the link for that is in the comment section. Trust me, guys, it's a phenomenal story. And if you want a good read, please go and buy that book. And you'll find the link for that in the comment section. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Peace.